A man believes he is free because he walks where he pleases, speaks without censorship, and bows to no master. But the Stoic does not judge freedom by movement or speech or external permissions. He looks deeper. The Stoics would have understood this, though they used different language. They believe the unexamined impulse is the true tyrant. They called it pathos, passion, untrained emotion, inner chaos. What Jung called shadow, the Stoics called ungoverned reason. The man who explodes at small insults is not free. The man who chases approval is not free. The man who fears being alone, who speaks to be seen, who hides behind loud confidence, he is not free. He is captive to a set of internal judgments he has never questioned, and what rules you from within will continue to do so until it is exposed, examined, and mastered. Most people mistake comfort for freedom. They think that because they are not in pain, they are at peace. But the Stoic sees how often ease is a mask for dependency. How often silence is confusion, not clarity. How often success is nothing more than a distraction from self-confrontation. The soul cannot be free if it does not know what it fears, or why it craves what it craves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be not angry that you cannot make others as you wish them to be, since you cannot even make yourself as you wish to be." The point is not shame. The point is control. If you do not understand your own contradictions, they will continue to operate in the background, quietly determining what you do, who you pursue, what offends you, and what you avoid. The first task of the Stoic, then, is not to fight the world. It is to stand still long enough to observe himself, to see the habits that disguise themselves as instincts, to see how quickly pain becomes judgment and judgment becomes action, to see the old narratives, inherited and untested, that still whisper in the moment before he speaks. The worst master is the one you do not know exists. This is why the illusion of freedom is more dangerous than obvious slavery. At least the chained man knows he is chained. The man who thinks he is free, yet cannot endure silence, cannot sit alone, cannot resist defending his ego, that man is ruled by invisible forces. His emotions are triggered by the same patterns every time, and he never pauses to ask why. The Stoic trains himself to become aware of these patterns, not to judge them, but to render them harmless. He separates what is felt from what is done. He watches his mind not with panic, but with precision. And when he finds contradiction, he does not justify it, he corrects it. This is the only path to inner command. True freedom is not the absence of restraint. It is the presence of reason. It is the deliberate refusal to be pulled by every impulse, to be told what to value by fear, to be owned by past injuries, to be a puppet of what Jung called the shadow, or what Epictetus would call mere impression, untested and unrefined. If you are still ruled by unseen desires, you are not free. If you need others to reflect your worth back to you, you are not free. If your mood depends on how you are perceived, you are not free. And no external success can change this. Without inner clarity, even victory will become another disguise for slavery. The Stoic does not seek therapy. He seeks discipline. He does not chase healing. He pursues alignment, and from that alignment comes a deeper kind of stillness, the kind that does not require applause, does not need to be understood, and does not bend when others provoke. That is where freedom begins. Not in the world, in the self. The Stoic does not merely ask what a man does, he asks why. This is not to overanalyze, but to avoid slavery. Because the man who acts without understanding the cause of his action is not acting. He is reacting. He believes himself decisive, but he is following a script written long before he began thinking. And scripts that are not examined become laws that rule the soul in silence. You speak to be respected. You interrupt to avoid feeling invisible. You perform generosity so you are not abandoned. These are not decisions, they are reflexes rooted in emotion, fear, and memory. The Stoic seeks to expose them, not to indulge them, but to see clearly where the chain begins. Jung described this force as the shadow, the unseen aspect of the self that, when ignored, directs the life from behind a curtain. The Stoics did not speak of shadows, but they did speak of persists, the faculty of choice which must be purified of passion before it can be trusted. You do not begin free. You become free by stripping choice of everything that is not reason. You must be able to explain your own behavior, not in terms of outcome, but of principle. If you helped someone because it made you feel good, be honest. If you attacked someone because they exposed a weakness, name it. If you avoided silence because it made you nervous, admit it. There is no growth without this kind of rigor. This is not self-criticism. It is self-governance. A city cannot function if it refuses to track its own spending. A man cannot function if he does not observe the movements of his mind. You are not punished for not knowing yourself. You are ruled. You are predictable. And anything that is predictable can be exploited by others or by your own untrained nature. Most people want to feel free, not be free. They want the emotional relief of choice without the moral cost of self-examination. But the Stoic accepts the cost. He endures the discomfort of seeing his habits laid bare. He lets himself feel the sting of an old pattern rising again and interrupts it, not by force, but by clarity. This is where judgment becomes a weapon of liberation. When you catch yourself pleasing others out of fear, you pause. When you catch yourself defending a lie, you correct. When you feel insulted, you ask, did something real occur, or did I merely feel exposed? The moment you ask this, the spell breaks. Nothing controls a man more than what he is unwilling to see. If you have built your personality around competence, you will panic when you fail. If you have built it around being needed, you will collapse when someone withdraws. If you have built it around being admired, you will chase attention and call it love. But the Stoic builds nothing on emotional ground. He builds on choice. And choice, to be real, must be conscious. It must be free from reflex, from history, from performance. You do not owe the past the loyalty of repetition. You owe the present the discipline of correction. This is why the unexamined life is not worth living, not because it is immoral, but because it is reactive. There is no possession of self in a life run on habit, no mastery in a man who cannot slow his own hand before it moves, no depth in a man who cannot sit quietly in his own company. The Stoic trains his perception. He watches himself as if watching another. He says, "What did I expect to happen? Why did I speak that way? Why did I tense up when no threat appeared?" These are not spiritual questions. They are functional ones. A machine cannot operate if its parts remain mysterious. Neither can a man. Jung warned that we all wear masks, and worse, that we believe the mask is real. The Stoic agrees. The danger is not wearing the mask. The danger is forgetting that you put it on. When you confuse your persona with your nature, you will defend it at all costs and then call it strength. Real strength is not defensiveness. It is being able to expose your own impulse and revise it, to pause before reacting, to endure discomfort without performing, to walk through emotional fog without mistaking it for reality. You are not what you feel. You are what you choose despite what you feel. That is the threshold of freedom. Not to be untouched by life, but to meet life without needing to protect the parts of yourself you have never dared to examine. Men fear the wrong things. They fear public failure. They fear being replaced. They fear humiliation, loss, betrayal. But the Stoic sees that these are not the true threats. These are only the symptoms. The real danger lies elsewhere, not in the world, but inside the mind that misjudges it. A man who fears judgment has already surrendered to it. A man who fears silence has already exposed the instability of his inner world. A man who avoids confrontation with his own contradictions will always seek control outside because he has none within. And so we return to the fundamental problem, the one both Carl Jung and the Stoics saw clearly, though they used different terms. Jung spoke of the shadow, the repressed self, the unconscious drives, the blind spots that move us. The Stoics called it something else: but the principle was the same. What you will not face will become your master. What you cannot name will make decisions in your place. What remains unconscious will shape your judgment, and you will call it fate. The man who cannot see himself clearly will believe every emotional reaction is a justified response to reality. If he feels disrespected, he lashes out. If he feels insecure, he compensates with pride. If he feels anxious, he hides behind perfectionism. He will explain all of this not as impulse but as necessity, and in doing so he gives away his sovereignty, one reaction at a time. The Stoic watches this and he does not mock it. He recognizes it in himself first, because every man, until he begins the work, is ruled by a story he did not write, following rules he did not choose, obeying emotions he never challenged. Jung warned us people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. The Stoic does not call this cowardice. He calls it what it is, ignorance. But ignorance, when defended with pride, becomes a prison. A man can live his entire life blaming others for the consequences of his own blindness. He will call people toxic when they do not reinforce his illusions. He will call criticism cruelty, even when it is truth. He will believe that the world owes him understanding, even when he has refused to understand himself. And yet, freedom, true inner freedom, begins at the exact moment he stops doing this. It begins when he says, "Let me look directly at what I have refused to examine. Why do I truly speak the way I do? What pattern am I repeating in this reaction? Whose voice am I hearing when I get defensive? What need is being exposed when I try to dominate? What fear do I disguise when I strive to be light?" These are not spiritual questions. They are the foundation of self-mastery. If you cannot trace your behavior back to its root, you are not acting, you are reenacting. You are reliving a wound. You are repeating an inheritance. You are acting out what was modeled to you, not what you chose. And that means you are not free. The Stoic is not interested in rehearsing strength. He is interested in achieving clarity. And clarity is only possible when the entire self is brought into the light of reason. This is not indulgence. It is discipline. A man who sees his anger clearly is no longer a slave to it. A man who recognizes his desire for approval can break his need to seek it. A man who sees his envy for what it is, a signal of unaddressed self-judgment, can stop projecting it onto others. This is what Jung meant when he said that integration is necessary. The Stoics might not have used that word, but they practiced the principle. They did not repress their flaws. They identified them. They labeled them. They subjected them to reason, because anything you can describe with precision, you can begin to control. But anything you refuse to see will control you in secret. The modern man is terrified of looking weak, so he hides his fear behind ambition, his wounds behind productivity, his need for affection behind sarcasm, his insecurity behind dominance. He never allows the raw impulse to surface because he believes naming it would destroy the image he built. But the Stoic knows that image is worthless because it cannot protect you when life collapses. It cannot defend your character when accusation comes. It cannot comfort you when you are alone. Only truth can do that, and truth is never found in performance. So the Stoic seeks silence, not because it is peaceful, but because in silence the noise of the unconscious becomes audible. He does not avoid solitude. He cultivates it. Because it is only when the world stops talking that he can begin to hear what is operating inside him. And what he hears may be unpleasant. The voice of the child still waiting to be seen. The voice of the father still echoing in criticism. The voice of a past failure replayed as prophecy. The voice of shame telling him to stay hidden. But none of these are fatal. They are just undigested fragments of experience waiting to be brought into the order of reason. The Stoic does not respond emotionally to these voices. He listens, he notes, he interrogates, and then he reorders. The voice that says, "You are not enough," he answers with what is within my control. The voice that says, "Prove your worth," he answers with, "What does virtue require?" the voice that says, "You must not fail." He replies, "What judgment have I accepted without testing it?" And through this process, he becomes whole. Not flawless, not detached. Whole. A man who sees all his parts, the noble, the petty, the frightened, the calm, and refuses to lie about any of them. A man who governs his life not by instinct but by principle. A man who no longer needs to react because he already understands what drives him and has chosen a different path. This is not the absence of shadow. It is the integration of it. And once integrated, it no longer rules. And that is what freedom looks like. Not detachment from self, but command over it. There are men who spend their lives trying to arrange the world just right, eliminating risk, avoiding offense, insulating themselves from criticism, surrounding themselves with people who agree. They are always planning, always correcting, always adjusting the external, believing that peace lies on the other side of perfection. But the Stoic sees the flaw immediately. You may control your schedule, but not your emotions. You may control your income, but not your mind. You may control how others see you, but only if you are willing to lie. And when all of this fails, when people still betray, still insult, still misunderstand, what will you do then? If you have not governed your judgment, you will fall. Because a man who needs the world to behave in order to remain calm is not strong. He is conditional. He is a creature of his circumstances. And he cannot afford to see clearly because clarity would reveal that he has built his inner peace on external instability. Carl Jung observed that most people do not see things as they are. They see things as they are conditioned to perceive them. The Stoic makes the same claim with different language. He does not trust the first impression. He does not mistake emotion for evidence. He slows down judgment not to hesitate but to filter. And what does he filter for? Distortion, projection, fear. He asks, is this truly offensive, or do I feel threatened? Is this person cruel, or did they expose something I did not want to see? Is this situation chaotic, or is it revealing the parts of myself I never disciplined? This is the work, to separate the thing from the reaction, to distinguish between what is happening and what it stirs up within you. The Stoic holds that nothing is good or bad unless judgment makes it so. This is not a denial of reality. It is a recognition of power, because while you may not control the event, you always control the lens through which it passes. But here lies the danger. If your lens is cracked, everything you see will be distorted, and you will never know it. You will think you are seeing clearly. You will think your reactions are justified. And worst of all, you will think that what you feel is who you are. You will become opinion. You will become offense. You will become anxiety, masked as foresight. You will become envy, masked as justice. And then you will speak. You will act. You will build a life around these fragments and call it identity. The Stoic refuses this. He does not trust his first reaction. He examines it. He dissects it. And if he finds that it originates not in virtue but in fear, pride, or old injury, he discards it, no matter how emotionally convincing it felt. Because the mind, when left untrained, will always seek comfort over clarity. It will rush to judgment because reflection is labor. It will defend itself instead of investigating itself. And it will disguise emotion as ethics, preference as principle, and pain as righteousness. This is why freedom is not the ability to do what you want. It is the strength to stop yourself before acting on a judgment that has not been purified. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." This is not poetic. It is diagnostic. If your thoughts are resentful, your soul will become bitter. If your thoughts are paranoid, your soul will become defensive. If your thoughts are inflated, your soul will become fragile. The Stoic knows this, and so he protects the gate of thought like a city wall. He decides which judgments are permitted entry. He tests them. He demands evidence. He tracks them to their origin. And when he finds that a judgment was inherited or triggered or lazy, he replaces it with reason. This is not overthinking. This is authority, because if you do not govern judgment, judgment will be governed by emotion, and emotion, left unexamined, will always choose the path of least resistance. It will choose blame. It will choose urgency. It will choose anger, because anger feels strong even when it is weak. So the Stoic waits, not out of hesitation, but because he understands that the first impulse is rarely the right one. He does not suppress emotion. He gives it space to emerge so he can understand its nature. He watches the inner reaction rise and pass, and only then does he act, if action is still needed. And more often than not, it isn't. You do not need to respond to every insult. You do not need to correct every misunderstanding. You do not need to assert your identity in every room, because once you know who you are, you no longer need others to confirm it. And once you have learned to govern your judgment, you no longer need to control the world, because your peace is no longer held hostage by it. This is the paradox. The more inner control you possess, the less outer control you require. You become lighter, not because life gets easier, but because you no longer carry the unnecessary weight of trying to make the world responsible for your stillness. Jung would say you are integrating the shadow. The Stoic would say you are ruling yourself. Both mean the same thing. You have identified the parts of you that once reacted blindly and brought them into the realm of conscious governance. And that is the beginning of true command. The modern man is rarely alone, and when he is, he reaches for noise. He calls it boredom, but it is not boredom. It is fear. Fear of the self unmasked, fear of thoughts without distraction, fear of being seen internally with no one else to reflect an image back. This is not freedom. This is dependency dressed as productivity. And yet he wonders why his peace collapses so easily. Why a message left on read disrupts his mood. Why silence feels like abandonment. Why the absence of validation becomes a crisis of worth. The Stoic would tell him plainly, you are disturbed not by the thing, but by the judgment you have about it. And that judgment came from a part of you that you've never questioned. Carl Jung warned that people will flee the pain of self-confrontation into distractions that they label as life. But the Stoic sees the trap before it closes. He understands that if a man cannot enjoy his own company, he will never be free, because someone will always be required to soothe him, to see him, to reassure him, to protect him from his own inner noise. And the moment someone else becomes necessary for your emotional equilibrium, your sovereignty is lost. You will adjust your behavior to keep them close. You will suppress your truth to maintain their attention. You will lie, not with malice, but with fear, the fear of being dropped back into the silence you cannot face alone. This is how most people live, not by virtue, but by reaction, not by freedom, but by negotiation, not with clarity, but with emotional dependency disguised as love, loyalty, or connection. The Stoic does not demonize others, but he refuses to need them for inner stillness, because the man who needs must perform, and performance is a prison. So he trains differently. He does not start by seeking answers. He starts by watching. He watches how quickly he turns to his phone, how often he speaks just to fill space, how anxious he becomes when not acknowledged. He watches these things not with shame, but with precision, like a physician examining symptoms. He does not ask, "What's wrong with me?" He asks, "What is untrained? What is still reactive? What is hiding under the surface of silence?" Because silence is not empty. It is a mirror, and the man who fears silence fears the reflection. The Stoic embraces it. He learns to sit alone, not to withdraw from the world, but to fortify himself against its chaos. In that solitude, he listens to the impulses that normally drive him without notice. He hears the craving for affirmation. He feels the tension of needing to be perceived a certain way. He becomes aware of how much of his day is not lived from choice, but from unconscious expectation. This awareness breaks the illusion. He begins to see how often his personality is nothing more than an accumulation of adaptive behaviors shaped to survive environments that no longer exist. And once he sees this, he can begin to choose. The man who can sit with himself is dangerous, not to others but to illusions. He does not panic when unacknowledged. He does not rush to fix perceptions. He does not compromise truth to avoid temporary loneliness. He acts from reason, not from the hunger to be seen. This is why the Stoic does not fear detachment. He understands that detachment is not coldness. It is freedom from compulsion. It is the refusal to make someone else responsible for managing the parts of you that you have not yet disciplined. If you still need someone to validate your worth, you are not whole. If you still panic when misunderstood, you have not trained your sense of self. If you still resent those who withdraw, it means your peace was anchored in them, not in your own principles. The Stoic expects to be misunderstood. He knows that truth rarely travels with applause. He accepts that stillness will often be mistaken for coldness, that silence will be called indifference, and that discipline will be called ego. He is not moved by this because his audience is not the crowd. It is his own conscience. Carl Jung believed that the task of the individual is to become whole. But this cannot be done if every fracture is patched with praise, every insecurity soothed by another's presence, every silence filled with distraction. Wholeness requires confrontation, and confrontation requires solitude. This is why the Stoic does not seek constant company. He chooses it deliberately, but never out of fear, because a man who cannot endure being alone has no filter for who he allows in. He will tolerate anything, excuse anything, accept anything, just to avoid looking into the mirror of himself. And that, the Stoic knows, is how you become easy to manipulate. You will let someone control you if they relieve your anxiety. You will abandon your values if it means you are not alone. You will betray your clarity for the comfort of being understood, and you will call it love, or loyalty, or connection. But the Stoic calls it what it is, a loss of command. So he returns to the inner citadel, that fortress Marcus Aurelius described, where the noise of the world cannot enter unless you let it. And from there, he watches his needs. He questions them. He reorders them, until what once felt necessary becomes optional, until what once dictated his behavior becomes irrelevant. The modern man avoids this work because it is hard. But the Stoic accepts that difficulty is not the enemy. It is the filter that separates those who talk of freedom from those who achieve it. And once you are free within, the presence or absence of others will not determine your mood. Praise will not distort your self-perception. Rejection will not shake your foundation. You will walk through noise without needing to answer it. You will face misunderstanding without bending toward it. You will choose relationships not for what they soothe, but for what they sharpen. And in that posture, you will no longer be a hostage to your past reactions or to the people who once seemed necessary for your peace. Because now you have built peace where it was always meant to live, inside you. It begins early. A child learns to express joy in a way that makes the parents smile. He hides his sadness if it earns rejection. He adjusts his tone, posture, and language until what is seen is no longer what is true, it is what is accepted. And if this continues long enough, he forgets the difference. This is how the performance begins. And in time, he becomes convinced that the only life worth living is one that is seen, understood, approved. This is not a sin. It is not weakness, but it is a seed. And if left unchecked, it becomes a need. And if that need is never questioned, it becomes a trap, one that no external freedom can undo. Carl Jung knew this intimately. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, he said, because that acceptance demands the loss of illusion. The illusion that you must be liked, that you must be known. That if someone misunderstands you, something real has been taken. But the Stoic sees the problem clearly. Needing to be understood gives others control over your reality. If your peace depends on others interpreting your behavior correctly, then you are not at peace, you are negotiating. You are waiting for permission to relax, for confirmation that you were valid. And that means you are not sovereign. You are still performing for an invisible judge. This is why the Stoic expects misunderstanding. He does not chase it. He does not fear it. He does not build his self-concept around explaining himself. He does not waste energy correcting every misread intention. Because he knows to be clear with yourself is enough. You can speak truth and they will still hear threat. You can be kind and they will still call you distant. You can be silent and they will invent motives to fill the void. You can be loyal and they will doubt you. You can be direct and they will accuse you of cruelty. This is not your problem. This is the nature of projection. And a man who lives to avoid projection is a man who has already sacrificed his truth. The Stoic knows this, so he acts with virtue, not approval. He judges his actions by inner clarity, not external reaction. He speaks when speech is useful. He remains silent when silence is strong. And if others misinterpret, he lets them, unless correction is necessary for justice, not ego. Most people cannot endure this. They have never practiced sitting with the discomfort of being misread. They rush to fix it, to explain, to beg for recognition. But the Stoic is not reactive. He watches the impulse, but he does not follow it. He asks, why do I need them to know my heart? Why do I fear being cast wrongly? What injury am I defending here? And when he answers that honestly, he often finds not a moral necessity, but a childlike fear. A fear of abandonment, a fear of invisibility, a fear of not being special. Now some exciting news. Our channel now offers a members club. By joining it, you'll unlock exclusive benefits, deeper content dives, and personal insights. Join us on this journey and let's build a meaningful life together. And I also humbly ask you to leave a comment, as it helps my channel immensely. If you do not know what to comment, just write "better every day" so I know you reached this far. And don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Also, I've linked some books on Stoicism that helped me become the man I am today, and will also help you achieve a Stoic mindset. But freedom does not live where fear rules. And the man who demands to be understood before he feels peace has built himself on shifting ground. Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires breaking from the collective. And this is painful. It means walking away from the comfort of being liked. It means letting go of the narrative that your worth must be reflected back to you by others. The Stoic does this willingly, not because he desires isolation, but because he desires truth. And he knows that truth often travels without applause. He is not cruel. He is not arrogant, but he is immovable where it matters. He does not chase reconciliation when silence is more honest. He does not explain values to those committed to misunderstanding. He does not reshape his behavior to avoid temporary discomfort. Because every time you betray your clarity to protect someone else's illusion, you teach yourself that performance is safer than presence. And the Stoic wants presence. He wants to be here, not as an idea, not as a curated version of self, but as a whole being, aligned internally, even if misunderstood externally. This is not defiance, it is discipline. He accepts the cost of being misunderstood, and in doing so, he reclaims energy, he reclaims dignity, he reclaims the quiet power of a man who no longer needs to argue about who he is. The need to be understood is not strength. It is residue from a time when your identity was not stable enough to hold its own shape. But now you are no longer that person. You are not a child negotiating for presence. You are not a boy waiting to be chosen. You are not a man who needs every mirror to reflect him accurately. You have your own mirror, and it is clean. So when someone misreads you, you check it. If it holds truth, you thank them. If it doesn't, you move on. No defense, no outrage, just clarity. This is why the Stoic speaks little about himself. He knows who he is. He lives it. He does not decorate it. He does not market it. Because truth, when lived cleanly, requires no promotion. It will offend. It will confuse. It will confuse. It will comfort. It will sharpen. and through it all it will stand. And so does he. It is easy to look strong. You clench your jaw. You speak firmly. You keep your calendar full. You post about resilience and discipline and how nothing shakes you. But none of this is real strength if you are still ruled by the same unexamined emotions that dictated your behavior years ago. The man who has not trained his reactions is not strong. He is simply distracted. He avoids triggers instead of confronting them. He surrounds himself with comfort and calls it self-care. He floods his senses with stimulation and calls it momentum. And beneath all of it is a nervous system ready to collapse the moment life refuses to cooperate. The Stoic sees the illusion. He understands that emotion, left unchecked, is not a signal, it is a tyrant. And when you obey it without question, you live a life that is constantly reactive, never reflective. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The Stoic echoes this truth with simpler language. The wise man is not ruled by passion. Not because he does not feel, but because he refuses to obey blindly. He does not suppress his anger. He observes it. He tracks its origin. He strips it of its justifications. He asks, "Am I truly angry at this moment, or am I responding from an older story? From pride? From fear?" He does not indulge anxiety. He challenges it. He slows it down. He interrupts its spiral. He looks it in the eye and says, "What is real right now in this moment? What is within my control? What can be let go?" He does not chase validation when insecurity rises. He does not mask shame with aggression. He does not seek revenge to soothe a wounded ego. He stands still, and he watches, and he decides what serves virtue, not what satisfies impulse. This is what strength looks like in the Stoic framework: the ability to notice your emotional response and deny it, the power to dictate your actions. Not silence, not detachment, authority. Because every time you act on emotion without examination, you reinforce the belief that your feelings are commands. And if your feelings are commands, you are no longer sovereign, you are a subject. You might look powerful on the outside. You might lead teams, give speeches, make money. But if you are constantly disturbed by what others say, constantly adjusting yourself to stay liked, constantly fantasizing about being vindicated, then your inner world is a storm. The Stoic is not interested in reputation. He's interested in alignment. He does not ask, "Do I feel like acting this way?" He asks, "Does this action preserve my character?" He knows that emotion is a messenger, not a king. It tells you where your wounds are. It tells you what you fear. It tells you what you want, but it does not tell you what is right. You must decide that with your reason, the only faculty that can examine, weigh, and choose from a place beyond temporary sensation. This is why the Stoic trains through difficulty, not because he enjoys pain, but because voluntary discomfort reveals who is in control. When you are tired, annoyed, under pressure, ignored, your real nature emerges. And in that emergence, you meet yourself. You see how much of your calm was circumstantial. You see how quickly you justify poor behavior. You see how rarely you pause to ask, "Is this worthy of who I say I am?" And when you see this, not with shame, but with precision, you have a chance to grow, not through affirmation, not through pep talks, but through the deliberate weakening of emotional dictatorship. You will still feel rage, but you won't speak from it. You will still feel desire, but you won't obey it blindly. You will still feel fear, but you will not ask it for instructions. Because you have built a higher authority within yourself, not a voice that yells louder than emotion, but a presence that waits longer than it. And in that waiting, emotion burns itself out and reason steps forward. That is what Marcus Aurelius trained for when he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength, not control over the world, not perfection in behavior, but mastery of the inner command center, a separation between what arises and what is chosen." Most men never build this. Thus, they simply rehearse responses that protect their identity. They don't challenge their feelings, they follow them. They don't ask hard questions, they reinforce old answers. And they wonder why life keeps repeating the same lessons. Jung would tell them, you are reliving what you never integrated. The Stoic would say, you are suffering from what you never questioned. Both lead to the same conclusion. Until your emotional reflexes are subjected to conscious rule, they will sabotage everything you build. And no amount of outer achievement can protect you from that. This is why the Stoic does not seek the removal of emotion. He seeks integration under reason. He invites the reaction forward, but he holds it still. He gives it a name, a cause, a weight, and then he decides. He does not punish himself for having feelings. He does not pretend to be above them, but he never confuses feeling something with needing to act on it. Because every time you prove to yourself that you can delay, that you can choose a response aligned with your principles rather than your mood, you teach your nervous system we are no longer ruled. And that, over time, changes everything. Not instantly, not perfectly, but unmistakably. Until one day, someone insults you and you feel nothing. Until you are overlooked and you stay composed. Until anxiety rises and you say, calmly, clearly, not today. That is strength. Not the absence of emotion, but the refusal to kneel before it. There is a moment, and it often comes quietly, when you realize that everything you've been trying to prove was already irrelevant. That the image you've been curating, defending, performing, never truly belonged to you. It was borrowed. From fear. From culture. From memory. From people who never knew you. And suddenly, the exhaustion makes sense. You weren't tired from the work. You were tired from being misaligned. Carl Jung called this dissonance the mask, the persona. A necessary tool for society, but a dangerous one if mistaken for identity. It's the role you wear to be accepted, respected, safe, and most people never remove it, even in solitude. They wear it in relationships, in reflection, even in their dreams. And when they suffer, they assume the solution is to adjust the mask, not question its existence. But the Stoic begins where others stop. He does not seek to optimize performance. He seeks to strip illusion, not to become someone new, but to become someone real. And reality, by nature, is quiet. It does not explain itself. It does not market itself. It does not decorate itself for comfort. It simply is, clean, stark, unafraid. That is what the Stoic moves toward, a self that no longer requires agreement to feel true. This is the final threshold of freedom. Not the ability to do whatever you want. Not the luxury to escape pain. But the discipline to no longer shape yourself around anything false, not expectation, not reward, not fear. And that is the hardest freedom to achieve, because it requires death, not physical but personal, the death of the self you built to be loved, the self you protected with silence, the self you weaponized with charm, the self you used to earn respect while secretly fearing rejection. That self must dissolve, or you will carry its burden forever. The Stoic doesn't fight this death. He welcomes it, because he knows the longer you postpone this inner confrontation, the more you must pretend, and the more energy is wasted maintaining what was never real. The man who cannot release his persona will always be in conflict. He will love but never feel seen. He will succeed but never feel fulfilled. He will connect but always fear abandonment. Because the mask can be admired, but it can never be held. Only the true self can receive love. Only the true self can withstand solitude. Only the true self can carry responsibility without resentment. And only the true self can look in the mirror and say, I am enough, even if no one claps. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he wrote, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Stop explaining. Stop justifying. Stop waiting to be endorsed. You already know who you are when you are not trying to be liked. You already know what is right when you are not filtering it through convenience. You already know what must go. and you know it has nothing to do with others. This is why the Stoic values silence. Because in silence, performance dies. And when performance dies, reality enters. Not all at once. Not cleanly. But steadily. Truth seeps in. Illusions crack. And beneath it all, a self appears. Not polished, not charming, but unshakably authentic. You are free the moment you stop needing to be someone else. And to reach that moment, you must face the fear of being unseen. Can you be misunderstood and still remain calm? Can you lose admiration and still act with integrity? Can you feel the pull to conform and still choose your own alignment? These are not questions of philosophy. These are questions of character. Jung believed that wholeness was not perfection, but integration of the shadow, of the unconscious, of the rejected parts. The Stoic believes the same, that the self must be built inwardly and that only what is internally earned can be relied upon in crisis. Because when the applause stops, and it will, you must know what you stand on. If it is reputation, you will crumble. If it is comfort, you will panic. If it is performance, you will break. But if it is truth, you will remain. You will not rise and fall with praise. You will not distort yourself to keep peace. You will not trade your clarity for companionship. You will walk alone when needed without bitterness. You will act with discipline even when no one is watching. You will speak less, not from fear, but from sovereignty. That is the man the Stoic trains to become. Not a legend, not a hero, but a being aligned. He does not need to be special. He needs to be real. And when he achieves that, slowly, painfully, relentlessly, he is no longer a prisoner of others, of emotions, or of his past. He is not waiting to be understood. He is not seeking permission. He is not resisting reality. He is simply and finally free. Now, if any part of this message has been helpful to you, leave us your like and comment, helping the algorithm recommend it to someone who needs it at this time. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos. And if you look through the videos we've already uploaded, you're sure to find something to take with you. Have a good day.